and development partners, as well as other constituencies. Maurice has also served as the director for the Institute of Law and Environmental Governance, through which he has fought for the interests of the communities, especially on natural resources. All that to say, ladies and gentlemen, we have a more than capable panel, and I'm looking forward and I'm really excited to hear their thoughts in today's discussion. So, really quickly, I think I'm going to ask you to give a 30-second brief on your expectation for the week. Tony, I'll start with you. I think the mics are down there, so you can just grab them. Thank you. Remember, 30 seconds, guys. Thank you.
Technology. Thank you, Nasra. Thank you for having me here. My expectation for the week, I just landed this morning. I'm here until Friday. It's really to get a sense of the discussions that are going on in the conversations, and also to network with some key stakeholders, colleagues of mine that we met before, and also meet new people, new actors to see how we can push the agenda, different causes together. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have to say that some of you may be aware that this summit was initially tagged Climate Action Summit. And for me, the key word is action. And I'm hoping that whatever action represents to everyone, whether in form of partnership, whether in form of knowledge, whether in form of networking, whether in form of, building a new base of coalitions, I think we want to see. I am personally looking forward to action and action and action. And hopefully, by the end of the week, we don't look back with disappointment. That's my hope. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vera Bukachi, a Citizen Resilience Lead at Arab, a global sustainable development consultancy firm. But as we said, also an activist at heart, a researcher, and really, really driven by data. So for me, it's all about the data. What do we know? What don't we know? And being very cognizant of the fact that we're 7 years away from 2030, and yet, as a continent, quite far from meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. I think our motivation here together should hopefully get us to where we need to be, and I'm here to meet others and partner with others to help us get towards that target. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, friends. My name is Maurice, as Nasra introduced me. My expectation is that we collate what we find is critical as we head towards the COP. So we are just not going with a kind of a shopping basket, but we'll zero in on some things that really are critical and move from talk to action. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. And so since you mentioned that, I'll start with you, Maurice. So in your opinion, how can we ensure that the benefits of sustainable urban development are equitably distributed across the different segments in society when you think about urbanization, housing, and human settlements?
Thanks so much, Nasra. Picture this. As we speak here, some statistics tell us that by the year 2030, and Vera reminds us just 7 years to come, there will be 971 million people needing access to adequate and safe housing. That's close to a billion. As we sit here, statistics tell us that 238 million people live in informal settlements. As we sit here, lots of lives and property have been destroyed in the most recent storms, whether it is Idai in 2019, whether it is Tropical Anna, whether it is Freddie or even Idalia in the United States. The point is, we see increasing intensity and frequency of disasters. What are we to make of this? Is to remind ourselves that the time to act is now. It is time to act now because even last year when we had the Afri-Cities Summit here in Kenya, it was a question of how we build the cities of the future and for the future. Those cities must be more inclusive. Inclusive means that we design them in ways that are consistent with the implications of climate change, which means that materials that we use must be materials that respond to that. Inclusive means we design them in ways that make accessibility to spaces for living and for jobs much more kind of easy. Inclusive means we think about women and people with disabilities and young people. So this is how we get those benefits, because it is also about justice. It's about getting to those people who have been given the shorter end of the stick historically to really make the world look different. Last but not least, it's about being innovative. Chinua Achebe reminds us in Things Fall Apart by quoting a bird. He says, the naked bird says that since men had learned to shoot without missing, it had learned to fly without perching. The tools of yesterday may have brought us that far and may have been very successful, but they may no longer be suited for tomorrow. We live in a moment of abundance. We must harness that abundance of innovative technologies, different building materials that are much more conducive for our future and much more amenable to environmental sustainability, and partnerships that make it capable of being attained. So I would say it is a right time that we are having this conversation, but I would actually say it is even a righter time to start moving from this conversation to some concrete actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So now that you talked about action, and Dr. Funzo, your first comment was you're here for action, action, action. So I'll come to you. So in your opinion then, and we're looking at action in this regard, what are the innovative climate finance mechanisms that, in your opinion, have the potential to mobilize finance or investments towards sustainable building projects in Africa?
Thank you. Is this loud enough?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. I think it's important to establish some context just to help us to understand the magnitude of the problem we're dealing with, particularly in the African context. We are in the next, by 2050, and when you hear things like 2050, you think that's something for your children's children. No, it's for us. By 2050, basically 27 years from now, we're going to be talking about a population of 2.5 billion people, which is going to represent about 25% of the global population. At the moment, even with our current population, there's a deficit of about 100,000 homes needed on a daily basis, not even yearly. I mean, if you put that numbers of millions of people together. And so the problem seems to be growing at a scale faster than our responses. And that means we need to be able to do things differently. But it's also important to understand that the population growth we're going to experience in Africa, 80% of that growth is going to happen in urban spaces. So it's not just population growth, but it's also population growth concentrated in the urban spaces. And that tells you that cities are going to become what we call system of systems, because the mega system that has to think about not just urban planning. When you think about city, most people, the knowledge is, or the expertise is more of urban planning. But a city now becomes something that is aggregating the energy systems, the food systems, the transport system, the water systems, the social systems. So everything you can think about, all of those subsystems, they all aggregate together under the notion of one mega system, which is a city. And that is very complex. So it's very important to understand that. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to do. And so what we anticipate, and that should be done, and perhaps also with what we're doing at the African Development Bank, is to understand to appreciate the notion of what we call critical infrastructure. So basically, what is that one single infrastructure, a group of infrastructure that can have a multiplicity of outcomes? So can one mega infrastructure deliver water, energy, and those are some of the thinking. So it could be road, but it's not just road for the sake of road. Can the road connect agricultural production site to consumer site? Can the road lead production site to new market area? So that is the notion of doing things in a very integrated model. And what we have been doing, on average, the bank approves about $10 billion worth of investment on a yearly basis. And out of that, I think 90% goes to infrastructure, but these are critical infrastructure. And so I have been privileged to be part of a number of infrastructure projects, and you will see within that infrastructure project, we've got a social sector. So we don't have a standalone forestry project, but we have a road project that has a forestry component in it. We don't have a standalone agricultural project. We have an agricultural project in food production that has irrigated water systems in it, that has market infrastructure systems in it. So the ability to think about an integrated model, it's very important. Now, are we doing enough in response to the scale of the challenge? Maybe not. We could do better. And that is the power of partnership. How do we pool knowledge, resources, expertise together to be able to scale what we need to do? I won't go into giving you numbers about this project here and there, but the notion of our engagement is to understand that we don't have the luxury to solve small pieces of problem. We need to be able to think about an integrated manner and help us manage and have a smart use of the resources that we have. I'll keep it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you know, it's true. Like, there's more that we need to do urgently, and cities are you know, they're really an ecosystem of opportunities where we can harness not just, you know, cross-cutting partnerships, but cross-cutting solutions. But I think one of our challenges as Africa is that we're a reactive market, and we want to do things proactively. So sometimes you'll find that that becomes a challenge. And so at the Africa Regional Network of the World Green Building Council, one of our efforts is, you know, us lobbying governments. And collectively, we came up with, as I said, a key document which we felt would help us champion this conversation with policymakers across the region. You know, taking it to you, Tony, we launched this manifesto last year, and we've started lobbying quite a bit. So if you could give me the perspective as one of the Green Building Councils championing this, what, in your opinion, have been the challenges, and what are the opportunities of building the Africa we want?
Thanks. Yeah, so I think I'll start obviously with some of the challenges. I think also in many countries, many organizations, we have like roadmaps, and these are done well, and the same, like we spent like a year working on the Africa Manifesto, developing these policy guideline, policy briefs. I think the issue was already mentioned in terms of us being the built environment being a system, and the need for partnership, the need for innovation, like was just mentioned. So to get all of this to work and to change the system requires collaboration, requires partnership, like all the different actors in the system working together. And I think the main challenge, we've got beautiful roadmaps, we've got beautiful action plans, strategies, is how do we operationalize and implement these strategies? And actually, how do we do collaboration, and how do we do multi-sector partnerships? I mean, every time I go in these different summits and conferences, we talk about the same thing, but yet I haven't seen for myself effective and efficient collaboration. For example, government calls, consultation by just having 2 people representing the private sector coming to talk, while there are like maybe 20 people from government and 1 person from civil society, and they say this is, collaboration. So I think the opportunity today is that there's lots of focus on stakeholders' engagement, on importance of collaboration, and we should try, to do that better and to understand use cases or where it actually worked, because system, we can't just change system from one day to the other. It takes transitions, we know, takes like decades, and to be able to do that. And I think for me, it's very important to see how we do collaboration and how we can implement these different policies. I won't touch on the other stuff like money, finance, how difficult it is to get to access finance, even green climate funds. Just to get an accredited entity to be approved takes like a year or so, let alone to put your project proposal to get disbursement. I'll stop there. And also, we talk about innovation, we talk about scaling new products, and we know how conservative the building industry is. And this also, we need to, I think there's lots of work, actually. But the good thing is 80% of our buildings in Africa haven't been built, but would be in 2050. So built environment can be like a big lever for the transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I think it's also worth tying this into the bigger conversation here. One of the sessions we had earlier this week, Dr. Funzo was in that session. One of the sessions which was directed to the built environment is we need to look at the built environment as an opportunity to mobilize and unlock, sustainable finance. And a key thing that came out was, in the first instance, people don't understand bankability. And so if we're trying to mobilize finance, we need to have bankable projects as the basis for that. Without those bankable projects, unfortunately, you might be having several projects, but if they don't meet the requirement, you're almost answering the wrong examination questions, because you're putting in your own answers when you're being asked certain questions. That's one. So in that regard, one of the things we're trying to do as the built environment is to build capacity, especially from a regional perspective, and even at KGBS. One of the things we're trying to do is really disrupt the market by helping the market understand what is bankability. Because it's only if you understand bankability can you then put yourself in a position to realize these opportunities of gaining that finance. And separately, when it comes to collaboration, I really like your point, Tony. We've done some collaboration, but maybe we need to say this is what we need to achieve so that everyone in the room who is saying we are a collaborator or a partner, these 3 outcomes are for all of us to push for. For the purpose of today's discussion, what we're trying to do as the Africa Regional Network of the World Green Building Council is to push and lobby for the Africa Manifesto to be a key document that's guiding African governments, because that becomes then a unifying factor to say, this is what we want for the built environment. From a policy perspective, what does that translate to in your country? What does this translate to, from an African Union perspective? If you have a unified position, it makes it easier for you to know the next step and the next step. So, those are just my thoughts. But I'm really happy to hear your thoughts and hear your concluding remarks. I note the time is not on our side. So I think what I will ask is, Morris, on Sunday, the governor talked about making it easier now to build green. Those are one of the things he said as a county government he will try to do. In your closing remarks, is there anything else you're hoping at the conclusion of the ACS or this week that maybe government will do to help us?
Nasra, should I close before my sister makes any input yet?
So everyone's going to comment. So
no, I'm just conscious that she didn't make any remarks yet, Vera.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was my mistake. So thank you so much for pointing that out. So Vera, I think then what I will ask you is this. Really quickly, in your opinion, then, how can you, because you said you're an action activist, so tell me, how do we measure progress of sustainable urban development? And thanks for that, Maurice. And sorry about that, Vera.
No problem. So it's a tough question, but I think an important one. And I'm very conscious that we don't have much time. But I think we also don't have much time as a continent. We talked about 2050 and the need to accelerate progress. We know our population will more than double by the time we get to 2050. We will also have 4 new megacities. So Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, Khartoum, and Luanda will have 10 million plus people. Lagos will be a megacity, 20 million plus people. We currently have 800 secondary cities of 10,000 to 1 million. There are going to be thousands of more cities like that. We have to be talking about measuring progress now, but very conscious about the fact that we are in this space which is really, really complex and that we have to address at the present. So I have, I think one thing you'd said, and I think hopefully this leads back to some of what other people are saying, is the need to be bold in terms of how to measure progress, making sure we set ourselves some really ambitious targets about where we want to get to. How do we measure that? We set up a baseline. We need to know where we are now. So I think some of that work is going on, and then start to set up ambitious targets that drive us towards that sustainable urban development. If you're a small NGO, you measure your individual projects. If you're a large city, invest now in understanding the impact of what you need to build. And then continuously measuring yourself against that ambitious target. And then some examples at these different scales. So I think at macro scale, so for example, we have a few cities representatives here. There are multiple frameworks around the continent that are talking about sustainable urban development or resilience, whether it's done by the UN, whether it's done by private organizations such as ARUP, who have been measuring resilience for the last 15 years. The UNCSD are doing some work. The World Green Building Society is really, really pushing towards certification and things like that. So at city level, I think there's a lot going on. And the aspects of inclusion are absolutely critical. So what you spoke about and making sure we do not leave the urban poor out of that conversation, because they are the majority. In a city like Nairobi, 70% of Nairobi lives on 5% of the land. Are they represented? Are we really making sure we think about them? And then the second piece on that, and this is more towards the micro, and I think this is one of the reasons when I rejoined ARUP, because I used to work at ARUP before, is the really big ambition that we have as an organization, and where we made a commitment at COP26 to undertake whole life costing on all our buildings projects. What that means is that early last year, we developed an innovative platform to understand the whole life carbon footprinting of the work that we are doing. And thousands of our engineers are actually measuring what the whole life carbon emission for the buildings that we are designing, what that actually looks as to mean. And so we've essentially estimated our carbon handprint, let me call it that, and we can quantify the scales of emissions arising from our global building design, and then be able to set that baseline to be able to move towards a target. And then I think the final thing, I think, and this is just one thing that I think will be really, really, really important, is to start to think a little bit about how we get to that breakthrough process. How do we get to that 40% reduction in embodied carbon by a certain stage? How do we make sure that we are extending our commitments to whole life carbon emissions, not just for buildings, but towards a wider infrastructure and getting towards green infrastructure? In conclusion, I think, and I'll re-highlight what I said, I think let's be bold. 10 years ago, no one was measuring sustainability. 10 years from now, we need to be able to do that in a very, very resilient way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So parting shot, 30 seconds. What do we need to do for the Africa we want? Go.
Get the young people to be heard and to be visible. They have ideas that are actually much more uncolored by our experiences of the past, that maybe fear and all that. Let's get them on. Why is that important? Because part of what we are looking at is well-being. And if you look behind you when we have the home equals, it's because of the numbers. It's about the people. Those 238 million people that I was talking about, they're just not statistics. These are human beings. So home equals comfort for them. Home equals security. Home equals well-being and longer lives. With all that, we then begin to say, what do we need to do to ensure longer lives? It's got to be inclusive, it's got to be about partnerships, it's got to be equitable, so that their voices are actually included in that. But ultimately, I would say, let us be radical. And radical means, Nasra, even when you are talking about financial inclusion and bankability, that we've got to even disrupt that concept of bankability. Let us not approach it from the perspective, yes, my brother, like, what are we using to define bankability? Because some concepts or some measurements have been too conservative. I think we've got to have a higher risk appetite if we are going to get something that is different. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vera, try to be 30 seconds. Try. Thank you.
I will. I think about where the world will be in 2050. I have a 2.5-year-old. He will be 25, 26, maybe started a family of his own. He'll be one of 2.5 billion Africans. The Africa I want is an Africa that thrives for that young man. That's what I want.
Thank you so much. Doc?
Okay, we won't talk about bankability today. Two things. There's power in how we frame issues. If you frame something to be a risk, you tend to deal with it as more of solving a problem. If you frame the same thing to be an opportunity, your perspective, your systems building, your relationship building, everything changes. And it's the same problem we've had in Africa. We're doing everything to say we're reducing poverty as opposed to building wealth, because they're not exactly the same, and it's very important. Now, and I'm hoping that we can begin to see our cities as a center of opportunities in doing things differently going forward. Again, like I said, look, if there's any sector that has the best opportunity for both mitigation and adaptation, it is the built environment. It is the built environment. So how do we use that opportunity to scale up access to climate finance is very important. Secondly, I also don't want us to think about the fact that we don't have money. We do have money. But what we do have also in Africa is we have a lot of dormant capital. When you hear about the quantum of resources sitting in pension funds and that. So how do we turn most of our dormant capital in Africa to productive capital that we can use our own resources to be able to do that? The last point, please, we have to learn the language of money. You may not like the word bankability, but you can't do without it. So we need to educate our people more about the language of money. Thank you.
Thanks. Last but not least, Tony.
Yeah. So, sorry, I don't know who said that. It's like if we do the same thing over, it will have the same result. I don't know if it was Einstein or something. So for me, talking to what I was talking about earlier, I mean, we've done national projects before. We've tried to change system. We have done all of these things. And we need to, for me, pilot, like be innovative in the way we have some institutional mechanisms, how we do partnerships, how do multi-sector partnerships, to have probably action research, to be innovative and to pilot new ways of working together, new ways of putting national projects and implementing these projects together and learn from it like an action research and pilot it, and then when it works and scale it. Because I mean, I've seen it often and often, it's the same issues we have with national projects, the same challenges, the same feedback, and we need to change how we do national projects. And to get the Africa we want, we need to be innovative, and we need to try new things, and we need to reflect about it and be agile, like we use in technology, so we can find the right thing for right framework, right governance model, right institutional mechanism for our country to deliver Africa we want. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So in summary, we need to learn the language of money. We need to make sure the youth are part and parcel of this conversation. We need to think about the future now, and we need to learn how to do things differently. But I also want to say we need to have strong follow-through. ambition is good, but implementation is more important, because in as much as ambition gets us into the door, implementation makes us build that house, which will eventually build us the Africa we want. My name is Nasra Nanda. I was your moderator this morning. Thank you so much for your time. I will ask that we do two things. One, I would like a picture with the panelists. That's the first picture. And the second one with all of you as a thank you that you joined us, so that we can share it with you. Thank you so much for your time. Really quickly, guys. Thank you.